Hi class, this is Digital Flats and Specs. Today we're doing the pant. I'd like to show you how we start and exact measurements that you need to be putting down. Okay, we'll start today with the waist measurement. There's several different waist measurements. The one that you're going to use today is the waist rigid because there is no elastic in here or anything, so we're going to use a waist rigid spec. So in order to get the waist measurement, as you can tell that it's dipping in the front, you have to bring up the front to the back, and then you're going to make the waist straight across. Take your tape measure and follow along the top part of the waistband from edge to edge, and just go along like this. Just make sure it's coming out now to 15 3/4. So you remember, you double it when you're doing woven, so it'll be 31.5 inches for the waist. Your low hip measurement. You need to measure down a certain amount of inches, and this depends on the form that you're using, the size, and everything. So for this particular garment, we're going to measure down 6.5 inches. So we measure down 6.5 inches from the back down. We're going to put a pin here. Then we have to do this from the side seams also. So we're going to do 6.5 inches, put a pin, and the other side 6.5 inches. You take the tape measure from one side to the middle, pin to the other side, straight across. Make sure your garment's flat and do it all the way to the edge. Now it's 18 inches, double that, it's 36 inches. That is going to be your low hip measurement. Now remember, we have to figure out the position of the waist drop. So in order to do that, usually companies have their own waist drop that you do for particular style of pant or that particular store's waist drop, because these are hips, these are not on the waist. If you come up here to the waist, you're going to have a drop that'll be right about here, which is 2.5 inches for the front drop, and then the back drop, you'll come down here and it's 2 inches. So in the space that says to put position of waist, put 2.5 inches for the front drop and 2 inches for the back drop. Now the inseam. In order to get the proper inseam, we're going to go from the bottom edge, follow along the edge of this inseam, all the way up into the crotch seam. This is 27.5 inches. So put that down for inseam. Front rise, you go from the inseam up to the top edge of the waistband. So you go right along the edge. Make sure you're pressing down so it's flat. And we are getting 9 1/4. So put down 9 1/4 for the front rise. Okay. Now we turn it over, and now we're going to do the back rise. So you take it from the seam, inseam, measure right along the edge of the back rise all the way up to the top of the waistband, which is 13 1/4 inches. So put 13 1/4 inches for your back rise. Now we'll turn it back over. Now we're going to do thigh. If you don't have a thigh measurement in the spec pack, then add it in the yellow part. Thigh 1 inch below crotch. So you have to measure here 1 inch at the seam, put a pin. Now you're going to go all the way over. See how the pant is? It has little excess from the back because the back is bigger than the front always, but you're still going to measure from the very edge of the flattened part to the very edge on the other side. So you just start to measure straight across, make sure it's completely straight across. And this is 11 1/4 inches for the thigh. And you're going to double it, so it's going to be 22.5 inches for the thigh. Measure the knee. This one we're going to come down from the actual seam of the crotch down 12 inches because it's a shorter garment. Put a pin. Again, flatten out the garment. Again, the back is still a little bit bigger, but make sure it's flat. Go from edge to edge. And this is 8 inches. Double it is 16 inches for the knee. The leg opening is just right straight across at the edge of the seam. So we're going to just measure it completely flat from seam to side seam. It's 9.5, so double it, it'd be 19 inches. Now, functional zipper length. Functional zipper length is actually the actual length of the zipper. Make sure that it's zipped up. You're going to want to put in, measure just the functional part. So that's actually from the bar tack to the top, to the bottom of the waistband. Is the functional part of the zipper is 3 1/4 inches. So that's how long your zipper is, 3 1/4 inches. Now basically these are all the measurements that go into the spec tech pack. Now all the other measurements are what's going to go on your sketch page, front and back, detailed out all throughout your sketch, because these points do not grade. Waistband height. Waistband height is 1 3/8 of an inch wide. So you're going to put an arrow. It says 1 3/8 of an inch wide. This is a detail part that I'm going to have you detail out at the bottom of the front of the sketch of the pant. So now we're going to measure the pocket out. So from the top opening underneath the waistband over to the side seam, we're going to measure it 3 3/4 of an inch. Okay, you're going to have an arrow going straight across, 3 3/4 inch. Now we're going to see where it's dropped down. So we're going to the edge of the pocket on the side seam to just below the waistband. And that is 2 1/4 inches, the depth of it. So this gives you the measurement of the pocket. All the belt loops are the same size everywhere. So we're going to measure that out. The length is 2 3/8 of an inch long, and the width is 3/8 of an inch wide. So you're going to do 2 3/8 of an inch times 3/8 of an inch. That's how you're going to put it on the tech pack with the arrow. The actual fly length, okay, that doesn't include the bar tack, so it's going to be a little longer from the very bottom of where the fly is to underneath the waistband. You're going to measure that, and that's 4 inches. So you're going to put an arrow here and say 4 inches. And the width is going to be 1 3/8 of an inch wide. Okay. Now the coin pocket, we have to put that measurement in, and you only measure what you see. So whatever peeks out of the pocket is what you're measuring. You're not measuring what's underneath here or anything. That's up to the pattern maker to adjust accordingly. So you only want to put the measurement of what you see. So first of all, we'll measure the pocket straight across here. It's 2 1/2 inches. Then this side we're going to measure is 1 3/4 of an inch. And you only have to put this side, you don't have to put this side, because this side, this measurement and this measurement will determine this measurement. So you only want to give them one side. Now the other measurement you want to give is how far from the seam does it start. So you want to put the measurement here that it starts, let's see, 1 3/8 of an inch over from the side seam is where this starts. So put an arrow here, 1 3/8 right there. So that determines where it's placed. It's very important. Now stitching, as you can tell with the stitching, it's double needle, and it happens to be a quarter, let's see, 1/8 of an inch wide. So you're going to put double needle, 1/8 of an inch, and that's going to determine the stitching that's on the waistband. So you'll put an arrow here and an arrow here and indicate 1/8 of an inch double needle, DN. Also note, there's stitching right down the middle of the loops. There's bar tacks on all the loops. You have to put down all the bar tacks everywhere. Remember, this bar tack at the zipper is very important, and don't forget the rivets. Okay, this is like a bar tack, only it's with the rivets there. So you're going to have a rivet here, here at the coin pocket, and here. That's the stress points that when you put your hands in the pockets so that the pant does not rip open or anything, you need to have that there. And same with the zipper. So it zips only down to there and it won't rip everything else apart. Okay, now the stitching that I want you to put on, I do want you to put on this edge stitch around the pocket, and I do want you to put this one decorative stitch here. Okay, and it also has a bar tack here, so make sure you indicate that also. And this also in the front is a double needle, 1/8 of an inch double needle and stitch. And notice how the stitching on the zipper, on the fly is, it's also 1/8 of an inch, and then it goes down together. So you definitely need to sketch this out appropriately and do exactly as you see it. Okay, and also notice when you're sketching the pant, the back is higher than the front. You need to also indicate that and show that in your sketch, because you do not want them to be even, because it won't fit. And also this indicates that it is a hip type of pant look. Okay, so make sure that you have that. Notice the stitching here going down the leg of the inseam. You have to have that. And the stitching, if you notice, all the way down the front is on the front side, not on the back, it's on the front side. So make sure of that. There's no stitching here on the seams, just right on the inseams. And also just notice too, look at how the pant looks when you lay it flat. Okay, you have to sketch this like this also. Okay, so see how the pant, when you lay it right here, that the back is coming to the front. You have that little, section right here. You have to sketch this part of the back coming towards the front, okay? Because the back is bigger than the front. If you don't indicate this, then they'll make the front and back the same size and it won't fit, and it'll feel funny when the person has it on. Must show this like this. Okay? And also that the side seams, the back of the pant goes to the front a little bit. You're going to have to show that also. Notice here on the pant, because you are going to have to sketch it with part of the back coming forward, that there is a stitching right here. This holds down the pockets, all of these pockets that come into here. This stitch here is on all pants. This is something you have to put in. So make sure you put the stitch in. You can indicate how long the stitch is. It's 4.5 inches. Again, it ends with a bar tack. Very important. And then you can also show that the yoke is coming over here. So you need to have all this look within your front sketch of your pant. Now we'll go to the back. Now notice on the back, you don't see any of the front of the pant coming through to the back. Everything is indicated on the front because the back is bigger. So you have none of those seams or anything to worry about it. Notice the placement of the belt loops. I should indicate also that you need to tell them how far you want the belt loops to be apart from each other. Otherwise they could make it, really wide or too close. So you want to indicate that it's actually going to be 1/4 of an inch in between the belt loops. Notice where the belt loop is. One is on the seam and one's a little over here in the center back. Okay, that's important. Indicate just a label. You don't have to put the name of the label. You can just indicate a label is actually here, because they do a lot of that with denim. Now we're going to measure the back yoke. Okay, back yoke at side seam, you're going to twist over here. You need to measure the bottom part of the yoke to the bottom part of the waistband. And the gold part's getting in the way. It's 3/4 of an inch. So you're going to indicate 3/4 of an inch on this side. Then you need to measure in the center, again, right to the bottom of the waistband. And it's 1 3/4 of an inch from here to here for your center back yoke. And now we're going to get into the pockets. You do not have to do any of the embroidery, so forget about that. You do have to do the stitching, okay? But not this blue embroidery with rhinestones. You don't have to do that. Okay, so now we're going to indicate the pocket. So the pocket flap from edge to edge is 5 inches, and from the center front up, it's 2 inches. So it's 5 by 2 inches. Now we're going to measure this part of the pocket. Again, you measure what you see. Okay, don't worry about where it's coming up in here and everything, because we're actually giving a measurement for that. So in this case, because we only see what we see, we're going to give a total measurement from here to here, from the center all the way up to the edge, and that is 5 1/4 inches. We are going to measure the sides. This you do have to lift up a little bit. Is going to be 4 1/4 inches. Then we're going to measure right here across from the point over is 2 inches. Now this will give them the measurements that they need to complete this pocket. You're going to indicate and sketch out the exact stitching that's right here. Be careful. Look at the shape of the flap of the pocket. It's almost square with just a little roundness here. So it's not really round. It's exactly the way you see it. So make sure you sketch this exactly the way you see it. Okay, and not too pointy down here. So be careful. Now the stitching here is an edge stitch around the flap, and then you have another stitch over, which is going to be 1/2 inch difference. So you want to indicate that this stitch is 1/2 inch away from the edge. And the other one's an edge stitch, so you want to indicate edge stitch here and here. Now also on the pocket, it's the same 1/2 inch that's going around. And also notice that this stitch is actually rounded. It's not following the point of the pocket, is actually rounding out down here. So make sure, be careful when you sketch it, that exactly as you see it. Now we have to indicate when we put a pocket on where it's going to be located. So we start from the center back over. So we're going to measure from the center back over to where it starts, 1 inch. Okay, so you can have an arrow here, 1 inch is where it starts. Then you also have to measure from where it's going to be placed under the yoke. So from the top of the pocket to the top of the yoke, this one is 3/4 inch on this side, and then on this side it's 1 inch. So it's 3/4 inch here, and it's 1 inch here. So it's not completely straight across, it is down. Okay. Now also indicate the double needle here. This is actually a 1/4 inch double needle. It's different from the waistband, which is 1/8 inch double needle. So you have to indicate this for double needle stitch here and at the yoke. And notice it's at the top of the pant. It's not on the yoke where the stitching is. So be careful when you do that. The other thing that we want to indicate is this stitching down here. This is single needle stitching, and this is 5/8 inch wide. So put 5/8 inch single needle top stitching, and this is a folded hem. So put actually 5/8 inch folded hem single needle to indicate that. Trying to make sure that I got everything on this. Again, I want to explain always, you either give an inseam or an outseam. You never give both, because they won't be able to make the pattern correctly. So either do an inseam or outseam. We did the inseam. Make sure that you sketch everything as you see it in detail. You do not have to put this gap denim back here, but you will need to show the stitching that goes back there. Again, the front coming to the back coming to the front, on the side seam, and also in the crotch area. But see how it only goes from this area down to about here, and then it becomes equal going on down. Okay, this is it for the pant. Thanks.